And now it's time for Fabulous Film and Friends. This week on Fabulous Film and Friends, we've jumped on that bandwagon and gotten a full-fledged case of Deadpool-mania. That means we're going to discuss all three of Ryan Reynolds' happy little R-rated capers, which started in 2016 with Deadpool, directed by Tim Miller, starring Ryan Reynolds, TJ Miller, Morena Baccarin, Brianna Hildebrand, Stefan Kapicic, Ed Skrein, Leslie Uggams, Karan, Soni, and Gina Carano. Then it continued on with 2018's Deadpool 2, directed by David Lietch and starring pretty much the same cast, minus Skrein and Carano, with the addition of Josh Brolin, Zazie Beets, Julian Dennison, and Rob Delaney. And capped off with the most marketed and hyped movie of my lifetime, 2024's Deadpool and Wolverine, directed by Shawn Levy and starring Mr. Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, as well as a good portion of the previous supporting cast in cameos mainly, along with Matthew MacFadyen and Emma Corrin as villains. I'm Gino Caputi, and my solitary guest today is author, hypnotherapist, and comic book shop royalty, Joe Field. Joe, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Before we begin, I have to announce that Deadpool and Wolverine raked in over $430 million worldwide over the weekend in box office, the highest opening box office haul for an R-rated film ever. The question to you is, do you think Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman's over-the-top, non-stop marketing strategy of appearing on nearly every talk show and commercial for a month around the world hurt or helped its box office? In other words, could it have been more if they hadn't been so transparently mercenary?
I think that's how they managed to make in so much this last weekend, is through all that immense advertising and going on different internet shows and playing games and all the extra commercials and little stunts. I think that's a huge part of the reason why they managed to rake in so much.
Yeah, without a doubt, though it was so obvious that I actually considered not going, but then my kids were going, so I just said, okay, fine. I caved, but I didn't want to go. I was like, they're just so aggressive. It's clear they just want to get, just prove that we're going to save Marvel. Anyway, but there it is. I went and saw it. Okay, so before we get into it, the synopses. Deadpool's 1 through 3 is really about Wade Wilson, aka Deadpool, the merc with the mouth, a cynical, fourth wall breaking character who makes scores of naughty puns while killing bad guys in over-the-top, grotesque, CGI-enhanced ways. His powers are just like Wolverine's, meaning he has a healing factor and he's unkillable because he heals and regenerates his organs and blood faster than it takes for his body functions to shut down due to loss of blood. He also has cancer, which for some reason helps the situation. We'll explore how in this podcast. Okay, Joe, let's go through. We've just seen all three films.
Mm-hmm.
Rank them.
2, 1, 3.
Oh.
No.
I just saw one, and I saw two recently on the plane, maybe a week ago. And I saw 3 over the weekend. I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3 in order. I'll let you talk because I feel a rant coming on, and I don't want to hog like I always do. So,
that's okay.
Why do you like 2 the best? Which I think is an unconventional choice.
Sure. So part of it may be just because I think I've seen 1 more than I've seen the other 2 that. On rewatch, some of the jokes didn't land as well as I kind of thought they did. I think that 1 had that kind of novelty, the freshness of being like, oh, this is a different thing that we're doing now. And look, like, just because we're Fox doesn't mean we can't be intentionally funny, And I think that wasn't something that appealed to me as much. The second movie I enjoyed because I think that some of the jokes landed a little bit differently. A lot of them were still very similar, but it seemed like they took a little less time to kind of laugh at their own humor, and were less kind of panning to the audience to kind of get their, reaction than they did with the first one. And I think that there were just some different gags that I kind of enjoyed more. They're, I mean, it's you have to kind of appreciate the sense of humor in order to even care about the movies, right? I think that, for example, them parachuting out during high winds, I found that to be kind of funny in a kind of a different way.
Yeah.
And I think that I mean, for that scene alone, and then also for Domino showing how luck can be a superpower in such a ridiculous, CGI kind of way. It was something that I thought was more fun and interesting than a lot of the things that were explored in either the first one or the third one. So that's kind of why I put 2 up at the top.
Well, okay, interesting, good. I hadn't seen Deadpool since I first saw. I didn't love it. To me, it suffered from the same problem as Spider-Man did, the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man, meaning it rushed into the good stuff too fast. Whereas how is he so unbelievably good at fighting? And I realize he's a mercenary and all that, but the things he can accomplish, they don't establish that he can do that as Wade Wilson before he gets the cancer. So then suddenly he just launches into being Deadpool with no, well, how does he become that good? I mean, his power is only that he can heal, right? And it doesn't mean that he's super powered. How can he move so fast and see bullets and all that? So I didn't understand that whatsoever. And I just thought, well, I still, and I need you to tell me. And I wish your uncle was here. I wish I had the temerity to ask him to join us, but how does his powers even work? I don't get it. I'm like, how does the cancer, what's the deal with the cancer? Explain this to me, somebody.
Sure.
What's the deal?
So, big disclaimer, I have read some of the comics, but I haven't read all of them. There are just way too many for me to read all at once. And
yeah.
So I have a feel for some of the humor and stuff even before the movies came out. And I think that the idea with the cancer is that, and again, this is different in the movies than in the comics. The comics, I think he actually has some of Wolverine's DNA, and that's they were trying to create another Weapon X, and so they use Wolverine's healing factor. But because cancer isn't just a wound or anything like that, it's actually your cells turning against your other cells. The cancer cells also regenerate constantly. And so his normal cells and his cancer cells are constantly regenerating, so his body is fighting off the cancer, and the cancer is still attacking him without dying. And so he's kind of in this sort of weird physiological stalemate that means that I guess he looks really ugly.
Right. But how does the power work? I'm just like, well, what does the cancer have to do with any of it? Does he even have to have cancer? Or is it just a thing?
I think it was just a way to get him in the door of who would willingly go for an experiment. It's somebody who's about to die or has nothing left to lose. I don't know that it has anything to do with why he can do crazy flips over cars or be able to react with ridiculous speed and things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it has anything to do with any of those things whatsoever.
Okay, well, see, I had one comic that I just bought because of the cover that had Cable versus Deadpool, and this was before he became a wisecracker. So this was early in the 90s. So they were just fighting with swords, and they were just fighting each other. So I just bought it out of curiosity. I didn't get any of that fourth wall breaking stuff at all from the character early on. He just, to me, looked like a Spider-Man samurai. That's what it looked like to me. I thought, who's this character? So I bought the comic and just kind of read it, and I didn't get much out of it. And then suddenly he became this sensation and in the comic book world, and I don't know when that started happening.
I feel I think the only reason why he became a sensation is because he started doing the fourth wall breaking.
Yeah.
Because otherwise he's just another example of a carbon copy paste of Deathstroke.
Right.
Same sort of gimmick, samurai swords and guns.
Right.
Similar looking costume. Both can kind of heal at an accelerated rate to some extent.
Yeah.
One of them is Slade Wilson, the other is Wade Wilson.
No, they were doing
They
were doing it sort of tongue in cheek because Marvel's always stealing from DC, so I think they were just going, okay, That again, from what I pieced together from Wikipedia and the like, it just sounds like okay, they were just ripping him off blatantly, like, haha, we're gonna do it again. We're gonna take your idea and make it better, basically, which is what Marvel's always done, except for Spider-Man, Hulk, and Fantastic Four, and Thor, and Iron Man, the original Marvels. But after that, it's
there are some exceptions.
But you got Ant-Man, you got so many Marvel ripoffs. There are just so many. Like, oh boy, yeah, DC did think of it first. Anyway, we're getting off track already. Okay, so the first movie I didn't love when I first saw it. Then saw the second one, and same thing. Like I go, I get it. It's kind of funny. I like the scenes that you mentioned. I like some of the humor. I don't love a lot of it, especially how sort of graphic it is in nature. Not that I'm such a square. I mean, I'm a square, but not that I'm like, oh, that's so offensive. But it is like, it's like using the F word all the time. It substitutes any actual story, which I think is still missing from all three movies. But, having watched 1 and 2 recently, I'd say 1 is at least the most rooted in an actual normal, regular screenplay of just a guy who wants love or something. It's not just gimmicks and fan service.
Yeah.
It's plenty of it, but it's still rooted in just a story of a character. And where the second one, I thought they were going a little, like, my biggest problem with the second one is Josh Brolin doesn't matter at all. Like, it's like, yeah, Josh Brolin, who I think is one of our finest actors in this generation. I've said it, of his generation. I've said it many times on the podcast. I think he's a great, great actor. And, he can do a lot. And he's in the movie and he doesn't seem to matter that much. And I gotta say, as we sort of veer into the third one, Hugh Jackman has the same problem. So I'm starting to think that it's just Ryan Reynolds doesn't really share the spotlight very well. He can share it with all the characters he can sort of be comfortable around, like Depinder and, the little, what's her name, Yushio or whatever her name is.
Oh, yeah.
Yukio. What's her name?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's fine with that. But then when it comes to sharing the stage with the major characters, he's not so good. Like, I felt Hugh Jackman in the third movie didn't really matter that much. And I honestly didn't understand what the point was, unless it was just sheer marketing. Like, what's the reason why he needs to save him? In order to, I mean, this, okay. Here comes the rant, Joe. I hated the movie Air. I hate these movies that are about marketing, successful marketing campaigns. It's why I didn't like Across the Spider-Verse. It's like, you're just marketing other Spider-Man movies and comic books and characters. There's nothing here. And then this movie was the biggest offender. Like, this is just a marketing this is basically a movie about contract negotiations and legal work and buying DVDs of a crappy era of cinema, which is the early 2000s Marvel movies, made by Tim Story, the Fantastic Four and Daredevil, and those horrible movies. They're like, these weren't good. Now we're like waxing nostalgic about the freaking Elektra movie, which was just awful. So I'm like, okay, this is crazy. So I just kind of walked out going, I hate this film. This is one of the worst of all time. It's just a commercial for buying terrible DVDs.
I feel like watching the movie, this kind of occurred to me, was that you could almost rename the movie Deadpool and the Island of Misfit Toys.
Right.
Because I mean, this is all that it is it's kind of, and it's an odd thing to try and make people nostalgic about something that everybody else has thrown away.
Right.
Right. Because I mean, that's the whole point. Is they're basically in the dumpster essentially of it all, and it's like, okay, so these are characters we're not supposed to care about, and we're supposed to feel nostalgic for them, and I think it's an interesting effort. I would say that I could understand. Well, I mean, I say it's interesting. I don't necessarily mean good, but I mean, because it's
never been done for sure.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about the recent alleged casting, right, of Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom.
Yeah. And
I mean, I kind of think it's the same thing, except that you're trying to get somebody everybody else likes back. in some sort of a role. You're really trying to feed on that nostalgia based on the fact that everybody loved Robert Downey Jr. Who loved the original design for Sabretooth?
Right.
You know,
Nobody.
I mean, who loved the? I mean, I think the design for Lady Deathstrike was forgettable. You know, in X2 or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, in any of those characters, you could say the same sort of thing. You know, Jennifer Garner's Elektra, or you know, whoever, insert person there. Almost nobody cares. But so trying to build nostalgia off of something that everybody else kind of hated or just was disinterested in is a very strange thing to try to accomplish.
I thought it was very odd. And then I didn't think they were going to go that far until the end credits. Spoilers for everybody who hasn't seen the movie. The end credits shows behind the scenes footage of all these 2005 or 2003 through 2010 era Marvel films. And, you know, like, wait, so you're creating this hype over a exceedingly bland and unsatisfying set of films.
Mm-hmm.
So you just we're gonna create this universe or what? But anyway, at some point, Wolverine was key, and if the universe was, he had to bring him alive so this universe can live. I don't even understand what their goal was. And just this whole TVA. I saw the first season of Loki, just terrible. It was terrible and it was terrible in Loki. So to put it into a movie where I'm like, John Q. Public is buying this. This is another one of these instances where I like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, where I'm thinking, this is so fan servicey. Does the regular people know even do they even know what's going on? And that's how I felt watching this. I thought this is for insiders who are signing contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares? You know, who cares why Wolverine comes back? I mean, the first scene where he's digging him up, yeah, he could have very well been alive. I'd have been better off. I'd have been better with that idea, as crass as it is, than what they came up with. You know?
Yeah, I think that is the hard thing. I also absolutely hate the TVA stuff. I haven't seen the second season of Loki. Maybe it gets better. I don't know.
Yeah, I gave up midway in the first season. It was so visually uninteresting.
Well, I don't know whose idea it was to think like, let's do like a typical 70s office, like setting for people who can master time. Why pick then? Like for out of anything, you know.
I don't know. It's as a concept, I didn't think it worked. I just assumed Loki just got regenerated and goes back to doing what he does. I don't care. You can come up with any reason to spend however many episodes I watched of him going to dealing with variants or his female self, and I just don't. This is watering everything down. Whether they're doing it with Spider-Man, they're doing it with the Hulk. You know, we see the previews of Captain America, and I got Harrison Ford totally destroying his legacy by playing the Hulk, the Red Hulk. You know, like this is all just so embarrassing. I mean, I haven't been reading comics for a while. I just keep up through osmosis and pop culture news, so I haven't read anything with Red Hulk or Red She-Hulk, but it just seems like, guys, you can't have all the characters in the comic books be superheroes. Flash Thompson, Betty Brant, Liz Allen, they're all superheroes. Like, this is crazy. The reason why these comics were good is because there was one hero, and the rest were supporting characters who supported him or didn't support him or whatever. But this is just getting crazy. And this movie just seemed like the worst of it all. And he says to the audience, oh, this multiverse stuff sucks, and yet still doesn't excuse it. Like, this movie's so lazy. I can't even believe I'm sitting here watching it. Plus, it's obscene. I kept watching, I kept thinking of my grandmother and my great aunts watching this movie with me, and I thought, there was a time where people went to the movies and they were about tuxedos and champagne and snappy patter and love, and I go, this is just boogers and navel gazing and just booger eating and vomit and blood and it's like, this is just so unpleasant, really. I mean, when I take a step back, like, what's happening? It's just nonsense. You know, this is our culture, and it's dumb. It's really dumb. You
Yeah.
know?
I think that a lot of the humor too. I mean, I I feel like I have a very broad range of sense of humor in most cases. I don't mind crass humor. I don't mind highbrow, and anything else in between, slapstick or whatever, is totally
Sure.
fine.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's percentages for these things,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're just going to, I mean, I feel like most people don't want to sit down and watch 2 hours worth of Looney Tunes violence, and like in the same sense
Well,
of like,
it all depends, but like I'd say the scene in the car where they're fighting in the
mhm.
car was Looney Tunes and was funny. I
Yeah, that
legitimately
was
that was
good.
like the legitimate laugh I got out of the movie was at the end when he was tied up like Roadrunner or something. Like it was like a funny bit
Well,
because they can't die. They are cartoons. You
sure.
know, and neither character can die, and there's no multiverses, so it's like, oh, for God's sake, they just positively can't die. So you might as well treat them like Looney Tunes cartoons.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like what you were also saying earlier about like the F word, right? Is like
Yeah.
I don't know that there's anything necessarily wrong with a lot of swearing, but like the problem is the more that you use it, the more it dilutes everything else.
Right.
And it's like, you use a little bit and people are going to know, oh, what is that?
Yeah.
If you're
It,
talking
it
about
it can be
ingredients.
funny if well placed, but
Sure.
if it's every line of dialogue, it's an excuse. It's
And it's
like, okay, you just
exhausting.
can't write. You just can't write. And that's with the anal penetration and all the things that we're just
Mm-hmm.
talking about in these movies. It's like, all right, it was funny maybe once in the first movie. And not even I don't love that stuff. I'm like, oh, he's getting cornholed. That's so funny. I just watch them and it's like, all right, I got it. It's fine. But in this
Mm-hmm.
movie, it's just so much where I'm like, yeah, I don't know. This is, my 12-year-old daughter was with me. Now she's seen the other Deadpools. She wanted to see it, but I was going, this is just vile. It's just decapitations and nonstop sex jokes, and crude sex jokes in a way it's not funny. Like,
Yeah.
what are we exposing kids to? This is just, it'd be one thing if it was clever. It just isn't. This movie was not clever at all. I just don't understand. And I swear the audience members around me, all the Cheeto dust fingered nerds with their cargo shorts and sandals, and I was one of them. I was wearing cargo shorts and sandals to the theater. They all were forcing their laughs. I could tell
Mm-hmm.
this isn't coming from the gut. This is coming from, I saw it in the trailer. I'm like, this isn't funny. This movie isn't good. I mean, I'll
Mm-hmm.
be the first to say it. It's just not good. So, going back and watching the first one after basically watching two, three, and one seems the most organically like a movie,
Hmm.
you know. Two, I just thought I didn't love it. I don't love the kid. I don't love much of it.
Yeah.
I definitely don't love Josh Brolin, and I'm a huge Josh Brolin fan. I'm like, what? He's not doing any. He's just not competing. There's only so many ways you can tell Ryan Reynolds to shut up, and both he and Hugh Jackman are saddled with that problem. Just shut up. Like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, yeah, you got to do something a little different. And both of them basically have the same part, and neither of them stand up. I thought Hugh Jackman just seemed like, okay, so now he's back in the movie as one of Deadpool's sidekicks. What? Hugh, baby, what are you doing? He
Yeah.
lost a lot of stature in this movie, I thought.
Yeah. And I think also like I think the other tragedy with Hugh Jackman in this is that they make it seem like, oh, this Wolverine has such a terrible tragic backstory and stuff. We didn't see any backstory.
Yeah,
Like they almost seem to deliberately ignore. I mean, like even the part where it's like, oh, we have this telepath who's gonna look into his mind and find out all this stuff, and it's like I'm thinking, oh, cool. Like we're gonna find out. We're gonna see whatever the traumatic thing was that happened. Bunch of dead previous actors in these films or whatever. You
yeah,
know, and no, it was nothing. It's like, oh, we're just gonna stand out here in the middle of nowhere, which is in
right.
your mind, I guess, and talk about how awful it was, and that's all. I'm like, what?
What did he
Are we
do? What
are
was
we
it? This
superior?
what was it? The Sentinels? I mean, what was it? What was it?
Yeah. Are we seriously supposed to care about it when we don't see any of it that happens and they don't talk about it at all?
Absolutely. And again, why is he central to the story? That I kept
Yeah.
going, well, what's he central? What? That's still like, did I miss something? I left the theater going, did I miss something? Why was it integral to get him into the story?
Well, my
Other than
understanding of
contractually we have to get him into the story.
they had said that the old Wolverine that died in Logan was their anchor point or something, and that when he died, the whole universe would die,
Right.
which seems stupid
Yeah.
as an idea.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
But
It's too self-referential.
it is. But it's also like, oh, well, when this guy dies, the whole thing goes with it. I think Deadpool's thought was like, oh, well, if we bring him back into the other world, then he can just keep living and he'll be
Right.
the new anchor point.
Yeah.
And then
That's
was flat out told
still
that's not the
a
case.
contract negotiation.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not a story. It's like that's not a story. That's a contract negotiation. That's all I kept thinking about. This is just a marketing movie. I mean, we're getting so cynical that people enjoy watching marketing movies. Well, I'm still old-fashioned and I don't. Marketing is the idea of promoting the movie, not promoting the story. You know, like the story still has to stand on its own as an actual work of art, not just, oh, well, it's just too reflexive. It's all just this big circular thing of, well, you'll find out more when you go to see the next movie, and you'll find out more when you see the next movie. It's like, I don't think we're ever going to get a story out of this.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to get these constant references to other things. And I really kind of hated it. Hated it.
They made such a big deal about how this was going to be the movie that ties it all together. That really ties together the Fox universe with the other, Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't think it did that at all. Like,
why does it have to? Why does it have to? Time was you would just have Blade show up. You just have Wesley Snipes show up. Wesley Snipes was actually, he came out with his head held high, I thought, hey, Wesley Snipes seems kind of cool still. That was it. Like, he seems good. Channing Tatum was so bad I was wishing for Taylor Kitsch, who played him in X-Men Origins. So, I thought, why didn't they bring Taylor Kitsch? He's a good actor. He's a good actor who unfortunately got cast in John Carter, and he was absolutely 100% wrong for John Carter, and that ruined his career. And it's too bad, because he's a fine actor. He just shouldn't have been John Carter. It should have been, in my opinion, it should have been Eric Bana. It should have been somebody who can carry a movie. He's not carry the movie material, And anyway, it's not his fault, though. He's a good actor. And I was like, why is Channing Tatum in this? I know, I do know. I know they were working on a movie with him, but he looks stupid. Mm-hmm. He looked stupid, and he's a butt of the jokes and whatever, but I just thought, this isn't, none of it's working. Even the Chris Evans stuff, at first it was kind of funny, and they buried that into the ground. And then that's the through line also with that film, is just everything was just every joke, every idea. Like the suit, how many times are you going to talk about that stupid, fine, he's wearing the yellow and blue suit. They made a whole movie out of that suit practically. And his character still, like, his suit seems to matter more than what he did wrong to Scott and Jean and everybody. Like, he keeps talking about the suit. They begged me to wear this suit. Like, what? I thought that would be a throwaway. Nope. It was half the movie was done talking about the suit. Everything. I thought everything was just run into the ground.
Yeah. I think the other thing is that I'm not necessarily in love with the whole Fox franchise in general.
Who is?
There are some people who really love. I mean, and I think there were a couple movies that were enjoyable in their own sort of way.
Name one.
I actually like Days of Future Past.
Oh. Right, yeah. But see, the X-Men movies. I always say this: X-Men movies are like Bourne Identity movies. They're so interchangeable. But anyway, back to the films at hand. Is there anything in Deadpool 2 that has sort of a theme that's worth exploring? Because I just saw it and I just thought, kind of veering into the part 3 territory where it is just all sort of fan service. And covering the sort of X-Men, the kid who's being tortured. The kid's being tortured and he has to learn not to, because basically he's Pyro, right?
It seems like that, or something.
And they dropped that kid. Actually, now that I think about it, I didn't even think about it. They dropped Domino. You think that she would have been a favorite. And then he made a crack about them dropping Cable because of research or like, did you remember the crack in part three? He made some crack about Cable not passing like fan market research or like he's not a, he didn't do it or so they just sort of wrote him out because of that. I think
That sounds familiar.
there was a little throwaway line about Cable not quite making it due to market research.
Hmm.
And I thought, yeah, but the problem is, Big Mouth, it's you. You wouldn't give him anything, any story to tell.
Hmm.
And again, again, I don't know much about Cable. I know he's Scott and Summer's son and all that, but I don't. I just he's one of those characters. He was on the periphery by the time I stopped reading comics.
He's another. I mean, you can tell by just from looking at his design, he's basically just the Terminator.
Hmm.
Like my time, except a good-ish guy. Like,
Yeah, but
oh
he's the
no,
lead. He's the leader of X-Force.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
When he comes back,
he's got the metal arm, the Bucky, like the obsession
Winter
Marvel has with
Soldier, yeah.
the prosthetic arm. So, and he's a definite '90s creation with all those bandoliers and all that, the guns.
Yeah,
He just feels like, yeah, that's how the characters looked in
he's
the
he's
90s.
another Rob
Yeah.
Liefeld
Yeah,
creation.
yeah. And I didn't pay any attention to him, so I don't know whether Josh Brolin did a good job or not. But Josh Brolin doesn't matter in that movie. That's what I walked away with, and I felt, as I said, Wolverine felt the same way. Like he doesn't really matter. Could have done the movie without him, no problem. You know, as you say, his story doesn't add up to much.
Hmm.
Um, Anything else to cover about the deeper meaning of these three movies?
The deeper meaning of the movies. I think that. Well, I don't know. I feel like with these movies that whatever things you could try to take out as themes are already like talked about through the third wall or through the
Right,
fourth wall in the
right.
movies, right? Is like, oh, like I mean, clearly in the newest one, it's look at look at how our research has gone, and now we're getting rid of the old, bringing in the new. Things are interchangeable. You know, um, it's not. I also think that maybe these movies aren't really meant to be analyzed incredibly deeply.
No, no, they're
Um,
not. For sure. I mean, it's escapism. I got it. It's
mhm.
escapism. It's comic book movies, but I when I look at them, I mean, the first Deadpool is just all its whole reason to be is to change things up. It's to
Yeah.
be true to Deadpool because the X-Men Origins again was just one of those baffling like, artistic choices where you go, why did they do that? Like Hugh Jackman wearing leather and all that in the
Hmm.
first X-Men. It's just the same sort of thing. Like, why are you taking these characters and doing whatever you want with them, Hollywood? Because that doesn't make any sense, the sewn mouth and all that. And so they made fun of that. He did remember. Do you remember that Ryan Reynolds did like a little short film in costume
Yeah.
to push the idea of Deadpool? So that
Yeah.
was, I mean, that's basically the point of it all is to just get Deadpool on track. And overall an okay job. I wish they
Sure.
explored him, like a Groundhog Day sort of sequence where he's figuring out what all the things that what he can survive, and it's everything, right? Like I
Hmm.
can survive everything. So that should be his wow, I can survive everything moment. And that's when he starts learning all these flips and you should see him just taking tumbles off buildings and doing all this stuff and practicing.
Yeah.
It needs a
Dying multiple times,
well,
or
because like Robert Downey Jr. does it in the first Iron Man to great success, and most of Iron Man is spent with him figuring out what he can and can't do, and
Yeah.
then he has this face off with Obadiah at the end, but a good chunk of the movie is him figuring out and I appreciate that because that feels like well, it's well earned then when he is Iron Man, and I just think that Deadpool doesn't do that, and that was my issue with it. I accept it now. Like, well, whatever. It's they just sort of glossed over it, and it's still more of a movie than the other two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of, yeah, I agree. I think that it would have been nice, and also like if we're going to assume that he has a similar origin to whatever he had in X-Men Origins with being like a special ops, like special unit kind of a deal.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the only thing that we really see him do is basically threaten a guy who is stalking a girl.
With yeah, and he doesn't do
You
anything
know,
that clever. He's just
no.
points a gun at a guy.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so this is that super special guy, and there isn't really a whole lot that goes into proving like, oh, he's actually like got these, he's actually done some really crazy things in his life, like real crazy action. Like we hear it told to us, but not shown in any way that may make sense.
Yeah.
And I think also like one thing that I have a problem with these movies is I feel like you're right about how these characters like Cable and Wolverine end up basically being sidelined by Deadpool. And it's because in these movies, we are essentially entering into Deadpool's reality of, ridiculous jokes, well timed, and looking at the audience for confirmation and, breaking the fourth wall, everything like that. And it's hard to be a real, actual character with realistic goals when you're living in a comedy and you have the comedy right next to you that's causing it. Like,
right.
I think that it's going to be one of those things where if they try to integrate him into any other movies, like as a secondary character, it's going to be extremely difficult.
Right.
Because he's kind of being painted, I think, into this corner of he's purely a joke character. And so we shouldn't be taking him too seriously.
Well, I read a Spider-Man and Deadpool comic, and it renders the same problem. It was just even on in the paper form, it's the same problem, because Spider-Man, who's always been, he was the original wiseacre in the Marvel universe, so he's relegated to just pleading with Deadpool to be serious the whole time, and that's not a good look for Spider-Man, So it's like, yeah, he just sort of nullifies every character he's around. Yeah, he can have, like I say, subservient characters, but he can't be around characters that you take seriously because they become jokes. And it's boring after a while. I mean, I think Colossus was a good foil in the first movie because Colossus hadn't, and they paint Colossus as such an idealist that it works really well. That is still a funny gag when Colossus is speechifying and Deadpool just kills Ajax, and it's pretty funny. It's still funny. Like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I actually had forgotten about that part. Like, oh yeah, that's right. That's pretty funny. So it's all as you say, in the tone of Deadpool. And what are they going to do with him? He's not going to be an Avenger, right?
No.
I don't think I think it's a bad idea.
I think even within like the comics, one particular comes to mind, which is Dead Presidents, I think is the name of the run. But the premise is like some former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent uses magic to resurrect all of the deceased former presidents of the United States to run the country. But unfortunately, they're all evil. And they're basically zombies. And S.H.I.E.L.D. says, like, well, we can't have people like Captain America running around punching people like George Washington in the face. So we need somebody who everybody else already hates to handle this. And they get Deadpool.
Okay. Well, that's
fine. So you end up with this...
Yeah,
and it works out really well with him running around killing all these evil zombie presidents and trying to make jokes that fit, but then being like, I don't know who this president is. How many presidents are there for this country?
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where he works better as a character that, like, I feel like having him go into such huge stakes as, like, oh, an entire universe is ending, it feels too big. It feels like it's too much for this particular character to shoulder. And it's ridiculous. But
right, but it's just even the fact that we're talking about it in these terms is because it's not like Galactus. He's not facing off against some sort of super force. He's facing off against basically TVA standing in for Fox and Disney. which I just find ridiculous. Like we've broken the fourth wall too much. Like there's not the only thing that's ending is their interest in them, and basically they're saying, "Hey, are you still interested in these characters?" And oh yeah, of course you are, because we love these characters. Remember the good times we had in 2008 and 2009, making Blade 3 or whatever. I thought that was interesting, considering how much they run things into the ground. There was one teeny little reference to Blade 3 with Ryan Reynolds, and it's like he never liked me or whatever the joke was, and that was a minor little, considering there's a whole thing with Chris Evans. Anyway,
I feel like this movie and also Spider-Man No Way Home, are just like trying to turn the audience into basically a giant focus group.
Yeah.
And say, how would you feel if, like, say, these characters came back again for some reason? Like, maybe a sequel, alternate reality thing.
Right.
You can still say it's connected, but just not really. It doesn't really have any bearing
Right.
on anything else. And so, like, they bring back all these characters, and they see what people are saying online, like, oh my gosh, it was so great to see Jennifer Garner as Elektra again.
Yeah, I know.
No,
it wasn't.
No, and most people probably aren't going to say that, so she's never going to come back.
No,
again.
she's getting a lot of praise. It's like, from what I saw, I'm like, oh my God, this is just too much. It's too much. But anyway, we have only a few minutes left, so let's dig into the technical aspects. I suppose, we should, for just to keep it brief, we'll just work on X-Men or Deadpool versus Wolverine. Again, I think the cinematography, the effects, the cinematography, they're all fine. I got no problem. Anything Shawn Levy, who's always been like a family man, like cheaper by the dozen, but he did make Real Steel, so that had a lot of effects. How do you think he did? I thought the movie looked kind of crappy, honestly. I think it being on one set made it really feel kind of small, actually. Did you think about that? Production design, it felt very small. You had TVA sets, and then you had this big wasteland set, which wasn't all that interesting.
Yeah, that, and then also like the street outside of his house, or outside their apartment, right? But even that, it's sort of like, okay, you're not looking at a big city in this case. You are literally just on this single block.
Yeah.
Like this little T intersection, you feel like it could very well be.
Do you mean for the final fight?
For the final fight, yeah.
Yeah, that looked nothing like set. It would just look like a set to me. I just thought overall it had a very small look. It had a small feel and look, honestly, for such a big budget movie.
For a big budget movie, I mean, like, especially because I think the second Deadpool, it felt like, okay, you're outside. There's a bunch of different places that you're going to, and
yeah, you're right. That's probably the most epic of the three, because you go to the prison, you fight Juggernaut, and that had sort of that big chase with Domino, which, as you say, was the highlight of probably the series, honestly.
Yeah, and
in terms of a well done scene,
and even just the part where Deadpool is slashing the bullets out of the air, but also just getting relentlessly shot.
Right. Yeah.
It's just also a fun
gag.
While
no, that was a good scene.
Cool,
But honestly, Domino was probably one of the better characters, and
absolutely.
I wonder. I mean, T.J. Miller, he offended everybody by ranting on a subway, so he got fired from everything. But I wonder why she was dropped. Because they kept what's his face, Peter.
Peter, yeah.
Yeah, so he got to make it. So I'm just curious,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Prior engagement or something, who knows?
Yeah. Well, with that in mind, aside from Ryan Reynolds, and it really is the Ryan Reynolds show, and nobody can play, really, who's your favorite secondary character?
Ooh. Favorite secondary character? I don't know that I have any favorite secondary. I mean,
okay, before we even start on that, is Ryan Reynolds good as Deadpool?
I think that there is. I don't think he needs to act very much to play this sort of version of Deadpool.
Yeah, but is he good?
I think he's okay.
I think he's good. I'll give
Yeah.
him that. I think he's very good. I mean, you can't say that, oh, they should get somebody else.
No, no, that wouldn't fix anything, I don't
Yeah,
think.
no, I think he's good. I think he's very good in it. But like all cocky bastards, he starts getting lazy, like anybody. Like even Tobey Maguire got lazy, you
Hmm.
know. I think this film by far was the laziest of them. I don't know why they thought using that TVA thing would be a good idea. Maybe Marvel mandated it. Who
Hmm.
knows? I wonder. I certainly wouldn't have gone that route. Um, but yeah, I'd say he's very good. So now, having established that he's good, if a bit selfish or doesn't play well with others, who does succeed? Dopinder? Who's that guy?
Oh yeah. I like. Well, she was pretty brief. I liked seeing Daphne Keane again as X-23 or
Uh-huh.
little, mini Wolverine, I guess.
Yeah.
I
But
don't.
even she got short shrift.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Like everybody just felt like they were in it, but not. Like I said, I felt like Wesley Snipes was the only one who sort of kept his head above water.
Hmm. Yeah, I think. I mean, I don't think any of them were given enough screen time or allowed to be in the movie long enough to be well developed secondary characters. I mean, I think even compare.
How about
I
in the
think
whole trilogy?
in the whole trilogy,
Yeah, who ranks the best in the whole? Is it Morena Baccarin?
I think she does a good job of going. I think she does pretty well actually
Yeah,
with Ryan Reynolds and is able to kind of give as good as she takes.
and T.J.
Um,
Miller. I think T.J.
and T.J.
Miller
Miller too.
he was really good until he got dropped.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
Oh, how about Leslie Uggams? What do you think of her?
Oh, Blind
Blind
Al.
Al. Yeah. It's just so funny, just because I grew up with her on Roots, and
Yeah,
she being more of a serious actress to have her go into this. It's kind of funny.
I like her. I think she is really funny too. And I again especially I like the gag of her having a gun. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
being willing to draw it on somebody just totally inaccurate. Like it's
Yeah, I
just
think I think they're all funny characters. They don't. It's almost like he doesn't need the superheroes, right?
yeah.
Colossus and what's her face? What's her name?
Uh oh.
Teenage.
Uh,
What is it?
Negasonic Teenage
Negasonic, yeah.
Warhead, I
Warhead,
think.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, they're all good. I think that's about as good. Like you keep wanting him to pair up with bigger characters, but as we've established, you can't.
Yeah.
So you might as well keep him as the sort of lead character with a bunch of almost like he's Ed Wood or something, you know.
Hmm.
Anyway, direction? I don't know. Could you tell one director from the next when all three movies? They all basically
No.
did the same thing, right? Even Shawn Levy, who was a very bland filmmaker, I think, even he kind of kept up with the style pretty well.
Yeah. I think they were all pretty similar, honestly,
Yeah,
in terms of direction.
they don't seem different, that's for sure. It must be Ryan Reynolds. I mean, he's a producer on it. It's his take, honestly. He's just getting a guy to shoot the
Hmm.
footage. Music, nothing. I mean, I wouldn't think the score is anything to pay attention to. Obviously, maybe the song choices. Anything to comment on that?
Okay, so I think in both the first and the second one, some of the original score, like in the background, it's not just the 80s and 90s and early 2000s best of hits, that are playing. Like they actually have some and whether or not you think you like it or not, it's a funny thing to have. Like during the Juggernaut scenes, like they have like that operatic choir doing the epic music score kind of
Yeah,
thing, except that they're actually saying like, "It's Juggernaut," like holy shit,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like Okay, that's funny and kind of self-aware. If you play the joke too long, it stops being funny. But
Right.
um,
I like Juggernaut. He's a great character, especially when he fight the Amazing Spider-Man series,
mhm,
like run with him, which probably one of the best comics ever. Uh, so I just think he's doesn't look very good. He's unfinished. Now in this movie they went back. It wasn't Vinnie Jones, but they went back to some. They said this year's version of Juggernaut. So they went
mhm,
back to the X-Men 3 look, whatever.
mhm.
But it just seems like Juggernaut really he's like the Hulk. They need to really work on him and make him a better character. Because I think the one not a huge disappointment, but in Deadpool 2, he just looked very CG and computery. He didn't look very good. He just looked
Yeah,
like a cartoon. So I just still think that they need to work on Juggernaut. And they really should do Spider-Man versus Juggernaut. They I don't know. Did you read those two
I
the Nothing Can Stop the Juggernaut series?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's from 1982. It's what got me fully into comics. Anyway, okay. Well, that's it, I guess. Would you recommend Deadpool versus Wolverine to the people who, the few people who haven't seen it?
Um, if you're a diehard fan of the Fox franchise, sure. You know, I mean, if you really feel like you need that send off and closure, then yeah, go for it.
Isn't
But
that the strangest thing you're saying? Isn't that strange? Is anybody even thinking this? Who in the world is thinking this? Like, boy, I really wish they would have given the Fox Marvel franchise the attention and love it deserves.
yeah, it's a weird thing to say, but you know what? There are all kinds of people online, and
Yeah.
some people are bound to love it for that reason, and never even think about it. But
All right. Well, I definitely don't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, even comic book fans, because I just think it's the most threadbare excuse to put two actors together I've ever seen. So, that's it. All right, folks. Joe, last words, last thoughts before I close off for the day.
nope, I think we said everything we need to say.
Awesome. All right, Joe. Thanks a million for joining me today. Pretty much could have been summed up in 10 minutes. Anyway, like and subscribe on YouTube and Rumble and Buzzsprout and anywhere you listen or watch podcasts. Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Thank you for listening to Fabulous Film and Friends. Copyright 2024, a Bel Air Films production.